My name is Susan Kihara, and I serve at the Clean Start Solutions, which is a social enterprise that was set up to help in the reintegration of women, children and girls who have been impacted by the criminal justice system in Kenya. And my position as a Chief Innovations Officer is oversight on programs as well as in operations. Clean Start's story began in 2015 when our vision bearer, Teresa Njoroge, on her release from prison, came out and began mobilizing resources from church as well as friends to help her support in her reintegration journey for the children and the women that she had come across. Now, her story begins in prison. No, actually, her story begins outside of prison. She was a banker and she handled a fraudulent transaction that showed her ending up in prison as a result of her not giving a bribe for her sentencing not to be, to be put in place. At the time, she had a 3-month-old baby, her daughter, and when she was inside, she came across firsthand what it meant for a woman who had a small baby not to have access to dignity. And dignity encompasses things that, simple things like soap, diapers, sanitary towels, tissue paper. And once she was released, she started going around appealing for support in kind from well-wishers and anybody who would listen to her story and ask them, would they support her on this cause of raising donations that included diapers and soap and sanitary towels for the women and take them back into prison. So early days, I would say the resource mobilization was mainly at a very rudimentary level, very confined to her immediate social circles. But what she would do is her and a team of other formerly imprisoned women would walk every Sunday and ask to tell their story to the church audiences, and then from there hope that their stories would move the audience to donate in kind towards their causes. Yes, we do. We gave it a name. She's called Social Impact Manager. And the reason for that is we realized resource mobilization goes beyond just a transaction. It's beyond the dollar support. It's about being intentional in building relationships and establishing channels where people trust you and they know that whatever they are giving is going to make a difference. And part of it was demonstrating what impact have we to show as a result of you giving our resources. So yes, we do have a dedicated staff member, but it's not just one person doing the heavy lifting. We have intentionally been training all the staff members to be able to do pitch decks, to be able to talk about their work, and more importantly, to be able to have a specific ask and a call to action in whatever audiences that they will be talking to. Our context is, there's a lot of stigma that has been seen, for one reason or another, that has been extended towards formerly imprisoned persons. And part of it is due to either ignorance or previous bad experiences and encounters with formerly imprisoned persons, which has led to a blanket condemnation for the entire group. Part of it is also apathy. We see it a lot, not with all, but with some duty bearers, where a culture has been put in place where there's lack of accountability and lack of follow-up and follow-through to ensure that the people who are tasked in ensuring that women who come from very low socioeconomic status are supported in order to grow and in order to improve on their life so that they do not end up being back into prison. There's also a lot of gaps in terms of policy. Kenya has been independent for the last 58 years, and we are still not seeing any policies being put in place on reintegration. So it becomes very difficult, even when you're doing your resource mobilization, to even define why are you doing the government's work? Why are you taking on work that should not be there for you? There's also the aspect of lack of technical know-how, as well as structures. There's not so much uptake among the very kawaida mwananchi or local person at the ground to engage with ICT channels and channel their funding, through the ICT platforms. And in cases where there is, it's either limited access or very expensive for them, to access it. There's also lack of coordination. Kenya is a very vast country, 47 countries. In Kenya, 47 counties, and we currently have about 43 prisons, which means if you are coordinating the logistics of fundraising in Lodwar, you will need a presence at the ground in Lodwar, for example, and that is expensive. So I'd say cost is also another thing. The other thing would be I'd want to point this out, that people want to help, but they do not know how to help. So there's also the aspect of how do you message your asks in a way that still provides dignity for the beneficiaries, but also ensures that the support coming in from end to end, it's very clear who it is ending up with. We are deliberately registered as a company, registered with no guarantee. And part of that was due to the record of our founder. She found it very difficult to even get access to government officers, and had to have a relative stand in together with her as a director in order for her permit to be considered. So there's an element of your record coming in as a barrier for you to register as an entity. But that was then. Now we've seen a bit of changes. The biggest concern would be the long term that it takes to get registered, because they do a lot of due diligence due to the record. So they have to go through very many layers of clearance before you get yourself registered. The recent unveiling of the workshop that we have had being supported by Chandaria Foundation at the Langata Women's Prison. And part of it was, it's a realization of a dream of our founder, Teresa Njoroge. And it showed even how if you bring in other local partners, you are able to increase your bandwidth. That's one. Two, it also showed how being consistent always in your asks and having one ask and being ready shows you're able to get outcomes out of it. It also showed a very good example of how private sector could be an opportunity, could be a gateway, in exploring other sources of funding, not just the usual, you write a proposal to the institutional donor and you get the money. So I feel for me that would be top. And I think the outcome, at the end of it all, we're going to be having women being trained. They're acquiring life skills that they can use, learning using modern technology right inside of prison. But more importantly, It's a model that we are introducing to the government that allows the women to be skilled, but also to sell, because they are producing clothes, the textile. They're also producing baking items. And from the proceeds, they will actually be able to support their own family. So it's a sustainable model that can be replicated anywhere in Africa. The challenges that we have faced as an organization in our resource mobilization journey has been quite diverse. It ranges from lack of technical know-how as to how to use the right approach, in this sense, storytelling, to have people buy into the vision, and more importantly, to continue supporting you on the journey. You find that when you use storytelling as an approach, you have to keep having new stories that emerge. And one of the things that we realized is when you work with the women who have gone through trauma, they need to have some psychosocial support before they are ready to open up and share their stories. And part of the reason is because they run the risk of being stigmatized again. So they did the sentence, they did the time, but even on their release, they're still finding themselves being condemned by the community. So that is one. Secondly, there's a lot of competing, what I would call competing interests. The world that we serve or we operate in has had, we're now facing COVID. Previously, we would be able to host very big, get-ups and get people signing in and, and saying, we are donating towards you for this and this. But with the COVID reality, we've had to scale down, have less one-on-one person engagements. And that has meant that it cuts out the humane relationship aspects. It also meant that we have had to quickly pivot onto doing local resource mobilization, but using ICT, which is a challenge for us in our context because not so many people, are, particularly in the rural contexts, are very much on use in the platforms. But one of the ways that we are overcoming this is we've developed an app. It's called the Mweza app. And what this will do, it's a mobile telephony application that will allow us to even send mass short message to people who we feel are willing to support our cause. It will also allow us to disseminate information about when they donate their money through the M-Pesa platform. They're able to trace it right from the point when it comes into a system right to who it ends up being at. So helping address the aspect of accountability. That's the other third challenge rather. Accountability means you're being open and transparent with all donations that have been received, either in terms of cash or in kind. And it costs money to put in place structures to ensure that you're able to trace where, if someone donated, for example, today morning we got someone donating a bakery unit. So how do we ensure that particular equipment ends up to the most deserving person? So the other challenge I would say is being able to match the needs of the donor to the person who you're selecting to be your beneficiary. You need to be very transparent and you cannot afford to drop the ball on that one. I'm happy to note the East Africa Philanthropy Network just released a report where they noted that 8% of civil society organizations are actively using faith-based fundraising models. And when we read that report, it immediately struck a chord in us, and we realized we have not actively been making use of faith-based giving channels. And one of the things that we have put in place is through the Catalyst 2030, we were able to meet our partner who set us up in setting up digital fundraising platforms that would allow us to speak specifically, generating content that is tailored to the faith. So for example, the Islamic community, we would be able, with the guidance of an Islamic scholar, to direct to them how they can be able to give to fulfill their faith obligations. So we have an Islamic scholar who we're working in partnership with to come up with guidelines on how we can do zakat as well as sadaq giving for our Islamic Muslim brothers and sisters. The other thing we're looking at is how we can actively reach out to churches, to see how best we can engage their audiences in the prison ministry, because we feel as much as service delivery is something we use as a point of entry, we are now pivoting ourselves and positioning ourselves as Clean Start Africa to do legal and policy reforms. But even as we step up to the next stage, we would want to ensure there's no vacuum being left at the bottom for service delivery, provision of dignity kits for the women and children that we serve who are in prison, and even as they exit, ensuring they have someone walking with them along the journey. For upcoming and emerging civil society organization, my recommendation is it's very important as you do your resource mobilization to first and foremost earn the trust. And how do you earn your trust? You need to be on point with your message. Be very clear on your goal and your mission, and be very clear that it aligns to the values that you stand up for. Secondly, recognize that resource mobilization is about building relationships in the long term. So be very clear, what value proposition are you offering for the person on the other end? How best can they support you in this journey other than the money or the things that they bring into you? What difference are they making with their contributions? And also being mindful that resources does not only involve the things, but it's also the time. So can you create spaces within your programs where they can come in and volunteer of their time and have first-hand interactions with the beneficiaries, because it has added value and it helps them even get a sense of a fulfillment from seeing what it is that they've given, how it has made a difference to the ones we're doing. Giving for me, I would have to say it starts with a story. From a very young age, I remember at my rural homestead, my grandma always had a special chondo or a special bag. And in it, she would put potatoes, she would put some sugar, some salt, tea leaves. And we always grew up seeing that when a woman walked in, most of the times it could be a widow or a single woman who was an outcast just in the community. That is what she would give. So we grew up having a living example from my grandma. And I remember when we asked her, why is it that you give? And I'll never forget, she told us that the hand that receives is the one that is open. It's never the one that is folded. So in giving is when you're able to receive. In giving is when you're able to make a difference to those around you. I think for me, my message to the young people is start from where you are. You don't need to have lots of resources. Just look within yourself. What is it that you have to offer? What skill sets do you come with? What opportunities or networks are you attached to that if you were to connect a cause to, you would be able to make a difference? Number two, identify the cause. Not every cause is for you. Which cause gives you passion? Which cause gets your blood boiling? What is that one thing that you're always saying, if only the government could do something about it? And remember, if not you, who else? Thank you.